Hello, all. Welcome. Folks are just getting settled to join.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I know we have we'll do the normal sort of give it another minute or two for people to log on. And then we will get started. As you all can hopefully see the slides, you have reached the info session for the Creative Sector Flex Fund. So I'll just give it another moment, and then we'll get started. Oh, and I need to rename myself.
Is someone helping you?
Yeah, I'm on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Um, okay. All right. I think I'm going to get started and then we'll see if anyone else joins. But um, at any rate, hello everyone. My name is Stephanie Lerner. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Grant Programs at the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. I am joined by my colleague Ren, who is on as well, although I don't see their video anymore. There they are. You have reached the 25-26 Creative Sector Flex Fund information session. Just to note, this info session is being recorded so that we can share it for those who are not able to make it. And we're going to get going here. So before I dive into the info session on the Flex Fund, I do want to just give an update. The Cultural Alliance is having its annual meeting and arts party on Tuesday, October 14th from 6 to 10 p.m. at the Academy of Natural Sciences. Ren is going to drop the link in to the chat, and you can all please feel free to join us. You can get tickets at that link. There's a member price for tickets and then a non-member. And I know we have a mix of folks who are members or not, or organizations. So we would love to have you all join us for that. Right. So the Creative Sector Flex Fund is funded by the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. They have just rebranded and are now called Pennsylvania Creative Industries, powered by the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. So if you see that name, Pennsylvania Creative Industries, floating around, it's the same state agency that has always funded this work as well as other programs around the state. And their mission is to strengthen the cultural, educational, and economic vitality of Pennsylvania's communities through the arts. They fund for us, along with other regional partners across the state, they fund two programs. One is the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator Program, and that is a $2,000 grant to an individual who either already has or looks to start their own for-profit business in some sort of creative space. We run that generally in the spring, and we do have plans to run that again this upcoming spring 2026. The other is the Creative Sector Flex Fund, and that is what we are going to be talking about today. And you can find information about both of the grant programs on our website. So the Flex Fund is a $5,000 grant It's a flat amount. It is a flexible grant, so that it can be used for general operating, or a specific program, or kind of anything that the organization sees fit, as long as it falls within some basic eligible uses of funds. It launched in 2023 to 24. So this is now, we are entering our third round. Each round so far, we have been able to make 80 grants totaling $400,000. We are still waiting on the state budget for this round to know the exact amount. But we have a commitment from the Council on the Arts, from Pennsylvania Creative Industries, to run this program. It is for arts organizations or art programs of non-arts organizations. So if you're a senior service agency, a social service agency, and you run art programs, your art department could be eligible. It is a 1-year grant. The grant period for this round coming up is January 1 through December 31st, 2026. And there are no renewals. Every organization must apply with the full application every year. This did replace Program Stream and Project Stream before that. Those grant programs were sunset. And this is the new sort of iteration of this small organization funding from the Council on the Arts, now Pennsylvania Creative Industries. The 2025-26 timeline, the application is now open. It opened on September 8th, and we anticipate it closing on October 17th, that's Friday. I put 6 p.m. I shifted it from a 5 p.m. deadline to give folks a little bit of extra wiggle room, but it is a hard deadline that the system, our grant management system, Submittable, will auto cut off. So, it is an exact deadline. The eligibility and panel review process, which I will go into in more detail in a moment, those will happen in October and November, and then we will do award notification and grant agreements in December. The grant period starts January 1st, and we will actually get payments out in January, just due to the holiday timeline. We anticipate payments will be distributed in January. As I mentioned, it is a 1-year grant, and the final report will be due January 31st of the following year, 2027. And just a note for those who might be current Flex Fund grantees, you can, your grant final report is due January 2026 for the 24-25 round. And they are essentially separate processes, so you don't have to have your report in order to apply for this next round, just because of the cycle of the timing. You can apply to this round, and then you'll submit your report in January. So that's how the process works for the Flex Fund. So just going into the organizational classification, this is the same as it has been for the Flex Fund, and pretty much for the prior grant programs, Program Stream and Project Stream. But I want to just walk through it here. There are essentially 2 different buckets you can fall into, arts organization and arts program of a non-arts organization. The requirements for either are the same. The difference is whether or not you're submitting a 990 for your financial documents, or if you're an arts program, you would be required to submit some sort of you need a financial report essentially in lieu of a 990. And the same is true for those who are fiscally sponsored. You would submit financial records rather than a 990, as well as if you are a C3 and you only submit a postcard 990, you can submit a financial budget report instead of, well, in addition to the 990. To go through the eligibility, I want to go through this in some detail to try to be as clear as possible. You do need to be a nonprofit, tax exempt corporation or a unit of local government. So, departments of municipal authorities are eligible. We have funded some parks departments in the past. For example, schools are not eligible. Schools directly are eligible for the Arts in Education program. Although if you are a nonprofit that works in schools, as long as you're a separate, distinct nonprofit, then you would potentially be eligible for the Flex Fund. If you are unincorporated, you can apply with fiscal sponsorship. Individuals are not eligible, but if you are an LLC and you can apply with fiscal sponsorship. However, you need at least 2 organizers listed on your certificate of organization. This has been a longstanding eligibility requirement, but we have had a few organizations not be eligible because of this specific rule. So I want to make sure it's highlighted. You must be located in Pennsylvania. I know there are sometimes organizations that work in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Generally, as long as you do the majority of the work or you seek funding for your work in Pennsylvania, you could potentially be eligible. And then you must be registered with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Corporations. With the exception of local governments and fiscal sponsors, you don't need to be registered if you are fiscally sponsored or if you're a local government. And we do have to verify that for every application. And then you do need to have at least 2 years of consistent arts programming. We also look at 2 years of your financials, so it needs to be 2 complete years. In terms of the budget revenue requirements, you must have an average annual revenue between 10,000 and 200,000, and this is specifically revenue. For those organizations whose budgets are over 200,000, the council's program is called AOAP, and so there is a funding stream for that program. The Pennsylvania Creative Industries runs that program directly, and there's also an entry track for those who have not applied for it in the past. You have to start with the entry track, and then you can get into the regular program. All right. So we determine the 2-year average by looking at your 990s for arts organizations, and then it's a financial statement for arts programs or those who are, as I mentioned, those whose 990 is a postcard, which is like a short form that doesn't actually list the revenue or any sort of financial information. This program financial statement must include your revenue, as well as earned income and income, kind of all income. So that way we can do the revenue calculation. And then lastly, all application materials must be submitted correctly before the application deadline. The materials must be accessible and viewable to us. So for example, if PDFs are password protected, or if they're illegible, for example, an IRS determination letter that is so blurry you can't actually read what it is, which I know that some of those are, but we do need to verify every single piece of this. And so if we can't read it, we can't verify it, and therefore we can't deem it as eligible. We try our best to catch things, and let people fix them, but it is a pretty strict rule about once the deadline has passed, you're not allowed to make changes to your application. And so, at that point, we cannot let you fix an incorrect document. And that's my kind of note about, please make sure the PDFs aren't password protected. Or for example, when you're submitting the financial statements, please make sure if it's from an Excel document that when you convert it to a PDF, that the totals and the annual, the year information is viewable within a page, and it's not kind of the information and then 10 pages later is the total column, because then we have to sort of sort through all of that kind of thing. And so we greatly appreciate making it as easy to read, or at least just on a single page, as possible. So actually, before I do that, I'll pause. Are there any questions? Please feel free to add questions in the chat or raise your hand. I do see one question. What's considered a non-arts organization? Essentially any nonprofit could be a non-art if your primary function, purpose, mission isn't arts related. So if you're a food service, if you're an environmental organization, I know we have funded the Schuylkill Environmental Center before, right? So their primary work is environmental, and but they do run arts programming. Community and Economic Development Corporation would be a non-arts organization. The financial records would be like a department budget, so that it shows the revenue of your arts work. We don't need your kind of audit or the statement of activities, because those are typically at the organization level. But it essentially needs to be your arts program budget financial statement. I hope that clarifies it. This is a good question, and maybe we can have I can put up like a sample one as a resource on our website. Sample of a financial statement. Let me see. I see another question of what is the final report? The final report is a very simple 1 or 2 page PDF form that you will fill out, that essentially you state, yes, we received these funds. There is a match requirement, and so then you state, yep, we have this match, and you list sort of generally what you did, and it's like a 1 paragraph narrative. It is very simple, so it is not it is not a big lift. Whereas I do recognize that compiling all of these materials for the application is somewhat extensive. So at least on the other hand, the final report is a pretty simple form to fill out and send in. All right, how do you know if you are registered with the Bureau of Corporations? That is a great question, and I would absolutely love to share this. Let me see. I'm gonna pause sharing. Hold on, let me see. I'm gonna take down my the slideshow for 1 second and actually pull up the website for the Bureau of Corporations, because this is something good for every organization, for you to make sure that you're registered, that you're kind of it shows up. I'm gonna pivot for 1 second to do this because I appreciate the question. Let me see here. I'm gonna pull up the eligibility review. All right. Okay, so let me go to share screen again. Okay. All right, so you should all be looking at a website now, and it says Department of State. This is, I'm gonna drop this website in the chat. This page is maintained by the state, Pennsylvania Department of State. It does not say PA right here, but this is a Pennsylvania thing. So this is where you search if someone is a registered entity. So I'm gonna just search us, the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, and I type the name in, I hit enter, and I get the search results. And this shows our name, what our category is. So we're a charitable organization. These things do need to be renewed periodically. So it shows our expiration date. This is our EIN, the address, and our general information. So this is where you can verify that you are in there, that you're registered correctly. I actually think the last time we did the eligibility check, we found a couple of errors. There was a typo in an EIN, that sort of thing. So always good to just double check this information. So that's the Pennsylvania Department of State charities search. Then there is also the business search. So I think, can you see that I have switched tabs? So this is also within the Department of State, to verify kind of that you're registered to do business. Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. And so this shows, here we are registered as a domestic nonprofit corporation, initially filed in 1972, which is actually kind of cool to see. You see the original date. And then we were formed in Pennsylvania, and there's our address. You can actually click on it and see the sort of complete information. And so this is what every organization should be registered. If you are a nonprofit corporation, 501c3, you would be registered with this. Your sort of certificate of organization is on file. Actually, if you are an LLC, you would also be registered here, and then you would be, or some other kind of organization, you would be registered here, and then if you're an LLC, or if you're not a nonprofit, right, if you're a corporation or some other entity, you would be applying under fiscal sponsorship. But we would know that. So depending on what type of entity you are, you we check for what it should be, whether it's you're showing up as a nonprofit or you're showing up as an LLC, or you're registered for the charity search. So that is how you tell. Thank you for asking. Usually it is the person who handles the financials who makes sure your certificates are up to date. I know a lot of you all are small organizations. These are good questions also for whoever does your taxes, to kind of check with them as well. All right, so yes, I believe it is every year. That does make sense. That is every year. This is not, I am, that is a good thing to confirm. Yeah. And it is part of, it is along with the thing that sort of confirms that you're incorporated as the entity, as well as the charitable status, this website. All right, I'm gonna switch back to my PowerPoint. So hopefully this switched back to the PowerPoint. Let me. All right, so you see another question around the funding or the revenue. If you're seeking funds for a program, would the revenue requirements be for the program or the general operating budget? The revenue would be for well, actually, that depends on. So if you're referring to being an arts program of a non-arts organization, then that is the program revenue. It almost feels like it should say department. So if you're a department of a larger entity, sometimes it's, you're not really a department, so to speak, in terms of the technical structure. So I think that's why they say program. However, if you are an arts organization, it is your general operating budget. And so you can't, if you're an arts organization, you can't submit a program budget for a specific program. This is intended to really support the small organizations. All right, so with that, I am going to move into walking through the review process. The eligibility review is what we start with. We encourage you to submit your applications early so that we can get the eligibility review process started. We will finish it once the application window closes, because most people will submit towards the end, and so we will need a few weeks following the application window closing to get through this paperwork review, essentially. So we go through and make sure the budgets are within the correct revenue as described, that you do show up in the charity search, etc. And once we do that, we've kind of confirmed the group of applicants who are eligible to move forward. And then it moves into the community panel review process. So every year we have a group of community members serve as panelists who will review the application really for content, based on a series of criteria that are laid out in the guidelines and in all of the materials we have set by the council. And so they review the applications for, that's sort of the quality review. And from there, we compile all of the application scores, and it results in the sort of list of the top applications. This list goes to a committee of the Cultural Alliance's board, who does the sort of final oversight and approval. In the past, before the Flex Fund was launched, when it was the project stream and program stream, this final approval was actually at the state level. The Council on the Arts did it. And one of the shifts with shifting to the Creative Sector Flex Fund was that they wanted the decision making to be closer to the ground. And so we formed a grants committee of the board to do this kind of final oversight and approval. So once that happens, we then can notify the organizations that have been approved, and we will, we get the grant agreements out and get people their funding. I'm gonna go through the application criteria. There were some changes to the guidelines, although primarily kind of language changes. The overall structure and kind of number of questions and all of that has remained the same. So there are 3 areas which are called values within the application criteria. They're community value, participation and engagement, and stewardship. And each of these areas has a number of questions, which are then, I think there's 8 questions, 3 within community, 2 within participation engagement, and 3 within stewardship. So I'm going to walk through those right now. One thing to note is that the way the criteria is set up is that there is a statement and then a corresponding question. And so we advise you take the whole thing as the thing that you're answering, right? As you're, consider all of the language in your response. And so as a result, I have numbered them this way. So it's sort of number 1 is the statement and number 1 is the question. And number 2 statement, number 2 question, and so on. They've also added an overarching question, which is not a question on the application, but is a description of what the community value, and there's one for each section, kind of what this section is trying to get at overall, kind of what is it going for. So for the community value, it's what are you doing as an organization that provides value to your community? That's kind of the big picture of what they're looking for with all of these questions. And so the first statement and then corresponding question, the statements are kind of set up as though sort of you would then review them, right? So the organization's artistic offerings and services that strengthen its community culturally, educationally, and or economically. Kind of how well does this organization do that is what the panelist will be reviewing for. The corresponding question, over the past year, how did your artistic offerings and or services support your community culturally, educationally, and or economically? And this particular question does include a little bit of clarifying instruction that your response may include a description of this value provided to your community, whether it's adding to the cultural landscape, educational opportunities, or economic opportunities. So I think they're really pointing out that this is an and/or question, not all of the above. So you're not expected to do all of those things, but you might be focusing on one or more than one, depending on your work. The second statement and corresponding question, artists and artistic offerings and or services involve and are meaningful to the community being served. Over the past year, describe how artistic decisions were made and by whom. How did you know your artistic products and or services were meaningful to your community? So I'm not going to read every single one because we share them in the materials, but I do want to highlight that the statement and the question are not always exactly the same. For the most part, the question is essentially asking, how do you do what's in this statement? How do you know, etc., but not always. And so that is why we we put them together and say, look at this whole thing, and this is what you're answering for each narrative question. So that's the community area. There's 3 questions. The next area is the participation and engagement value. And the overarching question is, how are you engaging your audiences to increase participation? There's 2 questions, or 2 statement and questions in this area. So they're on the screen. And again, please look at them as a whole, and respond, in your narrative response, kind of address everything that's in there. For the most part, they're pretty clear about, is this an and or is this an or? So you kind of should be highlighting whatever is the most applicable and relevant to your work. All right, so there's 2 questions for this participation and engagement section. The third area is stewardship. How does your organization appropriately manage activities and funds? This one has 3 statement and questions, and these are a little bit more perhaps straightforward. They really are about how you are stewarding the organization and your work, looking at your planning processes, looking at your financial planning and oversight, your capacity, that kind of thing. And so there are, as I said, there's 3 questions in this area. And so in total, there are 8 questions across these 3 areas. I will pause there for questions. Any questions? And all of this information, these questions, are on our website. There's a copy of the application questions in a Google Doc form. And that way you can, save a copy and work on it there. There is a word count. I believe it's 600 words per question. It was lower last year, and we got some feedback that it felt like it was too low, so I increased it a little bit, but I'm also trying to be mindful about the amount of reading that panelists do, to just also sort of keep it to not have to be we're not asking people to write novels. So there is a little bit of a balance to strike there. And Ren, yep, thank you for dropping in the website. That goes directly to the Flex Fund webpage. It probably still has some, no, I think we took down the last year's stuff. So it should all be updated with this year's. It's got the application, it's got the criteria that panelists, the sort of scale that panelists are asked to use, which is a very simple Likert, scoring system. And it also has the complete guidelines from the Council on the Arts. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the required materials, which I've kind of mostly mentioned, but just to kind of go through in detail. We do need your IRS determination letter. So I've mentioned that, please make sure it is legible. I know a lot of them are like photocopies of photocopies of photocopies if you're an older organization. We do need 2 years of completed financial information. So this is where it does have to be 2 complete years. So not your current, if you're, whatever your current budget year is. As mentioned, it needs to be your 990s unless you sort of have or fall into these other categories, which is if it's the arts program, that would be sort of the department financial statement, which will get a sample up on on our website for that. If you are an arts organization, if you are a C3 and you submit a postcard, we do need the financial statements as well, but we also need the postcard 990. So when you're going through the application, there will be places to upload all of those documents. If you are fiscally sponsored, we do need a copy of your fiscal sponsors information and your kind of agreement or MOU with that fiscal sponsor. And then if you are an LLC, you do need to submit the certificate of organization that shows you are legally, a legally registered entity. Lastly, we asked for a list of activities, and this is a one-page document that basically just lists that you can create. That should just be an overview of what your activities are. You can essentially use this one-page space to show whatever you'd like to showcase, kind of what activities do you run for each year, what, if there's something you want to highlight, kind of a description of some of the programs. It's essentially, we want, the guidelines want, what is your programming? What does your programming look like? And then, this really should be its own thing. We also have space in the application for you to submit up to 3 links to, so if you have social media or some YouTube links or to a website that shows some of your programming, this is where you can add that, and so that it will be easier for the panel reviewers to kind of quickly take a look at, what is your content and programming look like. Closing a clothing and jewelry line business, does that qualify? If this is a for-profit business, then no, it would not qualify. This is really for nonprofit. Some LLCs operate as nonprofits under fiscal sponsorship. But if you are a regular business, and you're not doing kind of nonprofit activities, you would be more suited for the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator program. The Flex Fund is really for nonprofit activities, whether it's, but the organizational structure and how you're kind of qualified, whether it's as an arts organization or you're fiscally sponsored, that does vary. As we all know, it can get quite complicated how things are structured. But in terms of the purpose, this is really meant for nonprofit activities. Local media press links would absolutely be fine to include as the links. Really, it's a space for whatever you'd like to include and feature. Oh, this is a great question. So there's a question here about, we established an account, and I'm assuming you mean a submittable account, and inserted a contact. Can we have multiple contacts? Because now only the one contact has access to the application. You can have collaborators access the application. So I'm going to walk through these slides, and hopefully that will show this. So how you apply, when you go onto our submittable page, which is linked on the website, you can click, this is last year's screenshot, but you will click into the Creative Sector Flex Fund. You will need to create an account. So there is one account that is the primary account that holds these applications. when you create that account, or actually, no, this is when you go to submit the application, it will ask you to link to an organization. So you'll have to look up your organization's EIN to connect it. If you're fiscally sponsored, this will be your fiscal sponsor's EIN. When you get into the actual application itself, here is where you can invite other users to access the application. So it'll say manage collaborators in the top right of the application, and you can then invite others to work on the application. And then when you scroll to the very bottom, you're able to save a draft. And that is where also you hit submit, but you can save a draft and it should keep all your work. Now, just as a disclaimer, we are not the ones who manage Submittable, right? We use this existing software platform. We cannot be responsible for lost materials if there is some sort of tech issue. So I do advise, work on the application draft in a Google Doc or something else that, particularly if you want to have collaborators, multiple people working on it. But the Cultural Alliance cannot be held responsible for lost documents if the draft somehow does not save. We would have to simply direct you to Submittable's tech support. But that said, draft saving is a feature that Submittable offers. And the difference being that you can come back in and edit the draft, and once you submit the application, you cannot edit the application. Once it's submitted, it's in. We have not had problems with draft saving. I just am very cautious. We have had problems with people saying, well, I uploaded it and then I couldn't find it, and things like that. So I'm not sure how much that is user error compared to the actual platform. I have generally found things in Submittable are saved and they're in there, and it worked pretty well. I did have one time I was being a reviewer and I was reviewing it on my phone, and the form didn't save my draft review, but I was doing it on my phone. So I guess maybe another tip would be do this on a computer. The interface on a phone is not quite as good as on a computer. And hopefully that answered the question about the multiple contacts. You can also, actually, on that note about multiple contacts, if you have created an application, I guess if it's a super draft application, I'd just say a different contact could take over. But if you have sort of a portfolio of materials in Submittable, or for example, last year's Flex Fund grant, if you bought the grant from us last year, and the person who managed the grant, like your grant writer person, is no longer the same person, you can have the account. You can transfer an application from one user's account to another. That is a function that you can do in Submittable. I think you'd have to search for it, but I know that staff changes. So if there was something that was under one person's login account and they're no longer working with your organization or volunteering, and you need the applications and materials to be in a new person's account, you can actually transfer those in Submittable. We also have a lot of folks who use a generic email as the main account. So an info at your organization. So use that kind of email for the login. some general tips that we've kind of compiled over the last few years with the Flex Fund. Of course, please be as detailed as possible. So if there's specifics around numbers, feedback from community members or surveys that you've done, please include the specifics. The second one I think is a pretty important one. While there is space in the application for you to put the sort of general description and mission of your organization, write the application as if someone has never heard of your organization. The panel reviewers are community members, and while most of them are from the arts, not everyone is familiar with every single organization. This is a 5-county region. Just Philadelphia alone is a huge city with a lot of arts and culture work happening. Not everyone has heard of every organization, particularly the really small, the small but mighty, amazing work that many of you are doing. There's some assumptions sometimes made in the way people who are super familiar with something will write an application. And so the advice is write as if you're sharing with someone who's never heard of your organization. Please double check all materials before submitting. This is a specific tip in Submittable. When you're working on the draft, one of the questions will be select what type of organization classification you are, right? This is the arts organization or arts program that I referred to. The application itself in Submittable will give you the corresponding questions, particularly like sort of financial or fiscal sponsorship. So if you're saying you're fiscally sponsored, it's going to ask you for your fiscal sponsorship agreement. And so make sure you've selected those questions before, which are kind of earlier in the application, because then it has the sort of logic tree set up so that it asks you the corresponding questions later in the application. And the application is one big long list. We try to make the headings as clear as possible. It is one big scrolling thing. That's just the way Submittable is. Unfortunately, we don't have pages within an application. That is what it is. I mentioned this already. Please make sure that any sort of financial statements can fit properly on a page when you PDF them. That's that. And then just some reminders. The application cannot be edited either after you've submitted, but particularly after the application closes. So make sure everything's submitted correctly, and that draft applications can be saved and returned to, but not the submitted ones. I will pause here for any more questions. When I click on the Creative Fund for this year, it asks me an email and password for the PA Cultural Alliances. It's most likely if you're on the Submittable page, it would be your whatever account you've used to set up a Submittable account. Our Submittable system is not linked to the Cultural Alliance's member portal. So they are separate email and password. Submittable, it's a separate account that is maintained that you set up with Submittable itself as a platform, the same way that you would have a Gmail login or an account with, I don't know, Slack, right? You log into Slack. That would be your separate account. So some questions about the applications. Yes, there's a copy of the application And actually, Ren, maybe you can just drop the link directly to the application into the chat. There's a blank application in Google Doc that we have linked on the website. So that way you can look at all the questions. It lists all of the just the demographic, right? It says organization, address. It lists every single field that you'll have to fill out in the application. And that's a Google Doc so that you can save it and work on it separately. A lot of the links in the website and on our website are they're sort of throughout the web page, but I've also put all of them at the very bottom of the Flex Fund website. So if you sort of scroll to the very bottom, you'll see a link to everything. That's like the guidelines, the application, the link to submittable, all those sorts of things are all linked on the website. Thank you, Ren. Question about how do you select panelists? We put out a call for panelists each year. I usually put it in our Culture Wire email, and then we go through, people can fill out a form and submit to serve as a panelist, and then I go through and select based on that, trying to put together a group of representing kind of across the 5 counties, across artistic disciplines, of course, kind of other aspects of diverse representation. We also, we do stipend the panel serving as a panelist. It's $250. In general, you could be a panelist if you're applying, and we can make, but actually we really do not recommend, we do not encourage that. But if there are, if there are folks that and who would be interested in serving as a panelist, we welcome that. It's a great way to connect and engage. We have 4 people will review each application, well, 3 to 4. And so then we average everything across that. So we really try to make sure there's a range of perspectives looking at each application, so that it can be as objective as possible, and that it's, there's a lot of different perspectives that are looking at the applications. Let's see. We will be posting the slides and this recording. Usually takes a few days to do the Zoom and get it up, but we will be sharing that out. And if there are other questions, you can email the grants email. So that's the top one. There's also my email and Ren's. If you have questions about membership at the Cultural Alliance, or like your member portal login, that is the question for Madeline, our membership associate. She can help, if it turns out it is the Cultural Alliance's member portal that you're having trouble getting into, she can help you with that. And then any grant questions can go to us. We are a small but mighty team who do all of this, the internal eligibility review and managing the panel review process. And so we greatly appreciate, all of the flexibility and understanding, and we will do our best to respond to questions as quickly as possible. Emailing is absolutely the best way to get in touch the fastest, as compared to a phone call. We definitely encourage you to reach out by email. All right. And I'll do kind of one final call for questions. We're sort of exactly at time here. All right, well, if other questions come up as you're working on everything, please feel free to reach out. Thank you again for joining today, and thank you for all the work that you do. We're really excited to be able to continue to offer this grant program. We know there's a lot of need, and we're just happy that we're able to work with the state, the Commonwealth, to be able to provide this locally in the region. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great day.